right here. And here is our chapel where we live in the country and worship. And if you go to the next slide, this is what it looks like there now. Now, I would just love it if all of you could come visit me. Would you like to come visit now? Maybe you'd like to wait till our summertime. Next slide. Because sometimes we do get snow there where we live, and it's a little cold. You might not be warm enough. Next slide. This is our chapel from the front. And then, but we do get warm weather where I live. Go ahead to the next slide. This is my house across from the chapel. So it's a nice place to live all the time, we think, but you might like it there in our summertime. It might be warm enough for you. I hope it would be. Yes. We're talking about Seventh-day Adventist church history. And that's a very interesting subject. And I think we maybe shared a quotation with you from the book Life Sketches, page 196, that says, "We have nothing to fear for the future except we shall forget the way the Lord has led us and His teachings in our past history," right? And so understanding our history, it is important to us. I want to come to the point of 1863. We discussed yesterday the forming of the General Conference in 1863. And from 1863 to 1880, there was quite a bit of expansion and institutional development within the Adventist Church, particularly in the health reform and Adventist lifestyle point. We know that in 1863, there was a major turning point when Ellen White received her main vision on health reform. And although the principles of health reform were already established in our church, some of the specifics, the how-tos, were still not understood well. But the people began to understand the need for vegetarianism. Now, I'm not going to ask you to raise your hand. I'm not taking a poll here today. But some of us here in this building today are probably vegetarians, and some of us may not be. I don't know what your status is. Some of our people may still be using animal products of various kinds. We heard a testimony earlier today from Brother Zadok about how Sister Doreen, when she gave up milk, she gave up her asthma and other problems. And there are so many health problems associated with using animals and animal products. And Ellen White was shown the wisdom, which science is just now today confirming, of avoiding animal products. But of course, we know that the original diet, did it include animal products? No. God gave Adam and Eve originally the grains and the nuts and the vegetables to eat, and later the fruits and later vegetables were introduced with sin. But we know that these things will constitute the diet of the redeemed in heaven. We won't be killing animals to eat in heaven, will we? And so it's essential that I think we get training right now, don't you believe? You know, before a man gets up to preach, hopefully he's had some training. Brother Zadok was talking about the training of the brethren, right? That we need training. But friends, we want to live in heaven someday, and we don't want to mess up heaven. And if that's going to happen, we've got to learn training here and right now. And that includes how we live. And of course, I'm not talking about extreme things. Sometimes when you talk to people in the world and you say, "I don't eat meat," that seems very extreme to them. But I think going out here and taking a cow, cutting its throat, bleeding it, butchering it up, roasting on a fire, that's extreme to me. You see, we're not the extreme ones, friends. You're not being fanatical at all. You're being biblically based in doing that. We learn to abstain from alcohol and tobacco and various poisonous substances at a very time that physicians were encouraging certain people who had lung problems to smoke tobacco. There was an emphasis on fresh air, exercise, sunlight, rest, pure water. Have you ever heard of something called the 8 Laws of Health? How many times does Ellen White call them the 8 Laws of Health? Yeah, it's a trick question. She doesn't call them the 8 Laws of Health. That's our idea. She calls them God's remedies, His 8 natural remedies. They're His remedies. but they are ways that we live. Now, in 1866, the Adventists established what was at first called the Western Health Reform Institute in Battle Creek, Michigan. This modest institution grew into becoming, and we'll go to the next picture. Next slide, please. Oh, I'm sorry. Let me just, can I pause? Can I pause? I forgot to tell you, and I wanted to tell you about this, that in our church, our world church, we publish a magazine called the 1889 Review. Sort of takes the place of the Review and Herald as best we know how. But this is a free magazine online. You can get it. You just go to 1889hsda.org and you can find a link for it. And we publish it about every 2 months, and I think you'll find it very interesting. And one more slide. And then where I come from, we have been publishing a magazine also. If we can go to the next slide. Thank you. We publish a magazine called Old Paths, based on the text Jeremiah 6:16, calling us back to the old paths. And starting next month, we'll publish this for 35 years, starting 35 years. But it has spiritual articles, things of interest to historic Adventists in it. And it's free online too. Just go to smyrna.org and you can find a link for it. And you can have that as a reference. But now on our next slide, oh, and by the way, could we go back to that slide for just a second? That's my granddaughter. Isn't she lovely? She's looking at an ear of corn. She's picked her first ear of corn ever, or maize as you might call it. Okay, but if we go to the next slide. Here's a picture of the Battle Creek Sanitarium, the one before it burned. And this institution became known for its innovations in diet and medical hydrotherapy from Dr. John Harvey Kellogg. And it brought international attention to Adventists like nothing ever had. World famous people went here to get treated. People like Thomas Edison, Henry Ford. I think the king of Norway, or the royalty went there even. Our educational reform began about this time. In 1874, the Battle Creek College was instituted because we recognized the need for denominational education, and we had early schools and academies across the Midwest and Northeast, and the school systems were integrated to become a way to promote Adventist study and belief and prepare people to give the message. About this time, we have systematic benevolence and missionary funding coming into the church. Do you know what the term systematic benevolence means? What does that mean? Have you ever heard of it? I don't see you so well because of the lighting, but I see some faces that look puzzled a little bit. But this is a systematic way, a plan to show benevolence, love, and funding in the care of the work, the necessity of the gospel ministries to sustain the poor and other things like this. And it was a precursor to the church's formal tithing structure. And of course, this helped to fund evangelism, ministers' salary, and growing publishing work. We began missionary work during this phase of the church in a very concrete way. Despite our small numbers, Seventh-day Adventists felt the call to a worldwide mission. We are a worldwide church because this is the world we live in, right? And there are people all over this world. I learned that one of the brethren, I can't remember, he said the year, maybe it was 1901, that Adventists first entered Kenya. I don't remember the name. Maybe someone remembers. 1906. Okay, thank you. But about 32 years prior to that, we sent John Niven Andrews, to Switzerland to start he was our first formal, official missionary. And do you know why they chose Brother J.N. Andrews? He did know languages, but there was one core point that they made the reason for choosing J.N. Andrews. They said he was the best man we had. The best man we had. And Andrews was quite a scholar. Andrews made a statement, and I don't have any reason to doubt the veracity of it. He said if the entire New Testament was lost, he believed he could reproduce it from memory, and much of the Old Testament. I don't know about you, but I'm nowhere near that. In 1877 through 1880, we have expansion into Germany, Scandinavia, United Kingdom. In 1885, missionaries reached Australia. We've all heard, of course, about Pitcairn Island and other Adventist adventures. And this movement was growing. Of course, it came in here to Kenya. From around 1880 to 1890, we had a period of crisis, debate, and theological development. The Kellogg era in Battle Creek began. Dr. Kellogg, who was brilliant, absolutely brilliant, he was a genius, there's no question about that. He was extremely charismatic. He expanded the Battle Creek Sanitarium, and yet his growing independence and unorthodox theological ideas, particularly pantheistic concepts, which we'll talk about a little bit later maybe, those were expressed in his book, The Living Temple, that was published in 1903. They eventually brought him into conflict with church leadership, and these tensions foreshadowed the early 20th century. During the time of 1880 to 1890, the most important and probably the most well-known event that happened in Adventism was the 1888 General Conference held at Battle Creek, Michigan. Minneapolis, Minnesota. And it wasn't just a General Conference session. A lot of what we think about when we think about 1888 didn't actually happen at the General Conference session. It happened at a session just prior to it. They had a session for Bible workers and ministers. And during a lot of what we call the conflicts of 1888, they actually occurred during that time. There were two young men who had been selected to be the co-editors of the Pacific Press's Signs of the Times that were at that General Conference Bible Workers and Ministers session. Their names were Elliot J. Waggoner and Alonzo Trevor Jones. You know them as E.J. Waggoner and A.T. Jones. And they presented messages, especially emphasizing righteousness by faith, the centrality of Christ, a corrective to the legalistic tendencies in the church. Now, if you ask a lot of people what their understanding of 1888 and its message is, if you were to ask 10 people, you might get 10 different versions. Do you understand what I mean? When you read about 1888, depending on whose history or whose perspective you're reading, you get a lot of different ideas. One thing is very clear. Ellen White supported the teachings that Jones and Waggoner gave at that time. She supported their message and she rebuked the resistant leaders. And you don't understand perhaps just how resistant some of these leaders were. Ellen White was shown in vision these men going to their rooms at night and mocking Jones and Waggoner and acting like they are them and emphasizing their movements and making fun of them. I can't imagine how I could be at difference with anyone theologically and as a Christian do that kind of thing. Can you? How could have our men done that? But she says our leading men were doing this. Now, George Butler was the president of the General Conference at that time, and he wasn't able to be there. And there were people who felt like that because his presence wasn't there, certain points shouldn't be discussed, that they should wait till Elder Butler could be there or a time when he could be involved. And Ellen White made the statement that the Lord's work waits on no one man. But you may know that historically, Elder Butler considered the theology on Galatians to be very important, and that, quote, the law in Galatians that was our schoolmaster to bring us to Christ that we read about in Galatians 3:24, that law represented the ceremonial law. Elder Waggoner, on the other hand, was teaching that the law that was our schoolmaster was the moral law. And this created quite a conflict. There was a conflict between Elder Jones and Elder Smith. One of their differences was on the 10 horns of Daniel 7. Who comprised these 10 horns? Were the Alemanni one? Were the Huns one, as an example? And Elder Smith, at this time, was considered a very important theological expert in our church that should not be questioned. And here is this young guy from the Pacific questioning Elder Uriah Smith. It wasn't taken well. It wasn't taken well at all. You might want to turn with me to Galatians 2:16. Galatians 2:16. I think I have a slide for it here too. Let's speak about the law for a minute. Can we do that? This controversy that came in Galatians 2:16, and I'll read the text. Knowing that a man is not justified by the works of the law, but by the faith of Jesus Christ. Even we have believed in Jesus Christ, that we might be justified by the faith of Christ, and not by the works of the law. For by the works of the law shall no flesh be justified. Do you believe that text? I think we all believe the text. In fact, I'm sure if I was to ask any of you, any verse in the Bible, do you believe this verse? You're all going to say, yes, of course, we cannot deny the Bible, right? We believe the Bible. But, and every time you hear the word but, oh yes, but, that means things are changing, right? It means we're going to try to take things another. But I believe it means this, or but I don't think it means what you just said, right? Now, what I have over here for you is an interlinear of the text. And the Strong's numbers from the Greek Strong Dictionary are listed with the numbers, and then you have the text. So let's look at this. Knowing that a man is not justified by what? But it doesn't say the works. You see, under every word that is in English, here's the original Greek word that we translate. Here's the word ergon, it means work, but there's no the in front of it. Works, by works. Now notice here, of the law, pneumos or pneumon from pneumos, law. But where's the of the? Where's the the? Where's the definite article at? It's not there, is it? We could actually read this, knowing that a man is not justified by works of law. Of should be there because of the Greek grammar. Of is necessitated, but the article is not. But by faith of Jesus Christ. Even we have believed in Jesus Christ that we might be justified by faith of Christ, not by works of law. Not by works of law. On our next slide, we have Galatians 3:11. That no man is justified, or no person, no thing, nothing, no one, nothing is justified by law. Do you see that? No one's justified by law. I think we have one more, Romans 6. We can add Romans while we're here. Romans 6:14, 15. For sin shall not have dominion over you, for you are not under what? Not under law. Not under the law, but you're not under law, but under grace. You're not under law, but under grace. Let's go to the next slide. Ellen White gave a solution to this. She says, I am asked concerning the law in Galatians, what law is the schoolmaster to bring us to Christ? I answer both the ceremony and the moral code of the Ten Commandments. In other words, friends, it's not the moral law, or not just ceremony, it's law in general. Any kind of law, ceremonial law, moral law, doesn't justify you, doesn't make you righteous. Only Christ makes you righteous. I'm thankful for that. Have you ever heard of someone by the name of Robert Wieland? Some of you heard of Robert Wieland and his friend Donald Short. They were missionaries to Africa, and I think they were in Uganda. Yes? Is that right? And they had come to the 1950 General Conference session, and they had a burden on their hearts. They had told the brethren, you know, we think this church missed the boat. Do you know this expression, this expression, missed the boat? Do you know what I mean? It means that we thought something got missed here. They had gotten a hold of some of the old writings of Elder Jones and Elder Wagoner. They had found Christ our righteousness. They had found the consecrated way to Christian perfection. They had found the book Glad Tidings. And they said, this is gold. This is opening up the Bible like I've never seen before. And why aren't we speaking about this today? And so they brought these concerns to the brethren at the General Conference. And the brethren said, well, write it out. You know, that's a good way to get rid of people. Just write out your concerns, submit a report. And so in about 6 weeks' time, they put together a document that was entitled 1888 Re-Examined. 1888 Re-Examined. If you've never read that, you should read it. It's available on our website at smyrna.org. You can download a free copy of it there. But in this, they explained the history of 1888, what was being presented, what was the resistance to it, and why, and how that message was to prepare a people for the last days. Now, let me just caution you. In 1988, and so I'm advancing a little bit in our history just temporarily. In 1988, Whelan and Short were still alive, and they republished, I didn't say, that's really not right. They published a revised version of 1888. And you may have seen that floating around from time to time. It has sort of an orange cover. Don't read that one. Don't read that one. That one's been watered down. I was associated with another brother who knew Whelan Short quite well, and we were in contact with Whelan Short in the mid-1880s about this idea of republishing 1888 Re-Examined. And our counsel was, if you want to update it, republish the original document and then put an appendix in the back or an addendum to it. Because the document itself was of such historical value, we felt like it shouldn't be bothered. They did not take that counsel. They basically rewrote a lot of it. And in my opinion, they gutted out some of the most important parts. In the introduction to the original, there was a statement that I think was one of the most profound but simple statements I've ever read. And it said simply this: nothing which does not stand the test of truth will be triumphant in the judgment. Could I say that again? Nothing which does not stand the test of truth will be triumphant in the judgment. Interestingly, that statement got left off of the new one. The brethren's response to Jones and Waggoner and Ellen White's support was very simple. We're sending Ellen White to Australia. We're sending Waggoner to England, and we'll leave Jones in America and split them up. That's right. In our next slide, we have a statement from Ellen White about her being sent to Australia, and I think it's interesting. It says, when the work, newly started in Australia, was in need of help, our brethren in America desired me to visit this field. They urged that as one whom the Lord was especially teaching, I could help the work here as others could not. Now notice what she said. I felt no inclination to go and had no light that it was my duty. The journey was a dread to me. I desired to remain at home and complete my work on the life of Christ and other writings, but as the matter was introduced and the responsive men of the conference expressed their conviction that I, in company with others, should visit the field, I decided to act in accordance with their light. So Ellen White, even herself, the prophetess, was submissive to the work of the brethren, even though she said, I didn't have any light, I should go. I'm not sure how much light they had, she should go. Now, during this time, Ellen White produced some wonderful materials, and we're glad for those. She did certainly do a great work in Australia. I've been to Sunnyside. Have any of you visited Sunnyside, or do you know where it is? Daniel's been there. That was her home that she had built in Australia, and it was a beautiful little home, nothing fancy, but it was in a very sunny setting, Sunnyside, there at Corumban. And she helped establish Avondale College, and a great work was done. And it just shows that the truth of Romans 8:28, that all things work together for good to those who love the Lord and are called according to his purpose. The text doesn't say all things are good, but it says all things will work for something good. And so whether it was really God's intention for Ellen White to go to Australia or not, he made something very good out of it. Why she was in Australia, in 1893, there was, in my opinion, a very epic General Conference session A.T. Jones was allowed to speak, and he spoke over 20 messages on just the third angel's message. And if you get a chance to read those bulletins, I would encourage you to read those sermons. But because of our insubordination, and that's what inspiration called it, we are here today. We are here today. Now, in the United States, this day may not mean much to you, but 3 days ago in the United States, it was a special day to us because it represented the 84th anniversary of the Japanese bombing of Pearl Harbor, which brought the United States into the involvement of the Second World War, and we lost over 2,000 men on that day to that attack. But that date, December 7th, also rings a bell to me in our history. If we go to the next slide, on December the 7th of 1901, exactly 40 years before Pearl Harbor happened, and I'll tell you why I'm mentioning Pearl Harbor again in just a second, Ellen White wrote a letter to Percy T. McGann. He was a physician and a teacher, and she said this, and it was a long letter, but I'm quoting you a paragraph from it. We may have to remain here in this world because of insubordination a few more years. Doesn't say just a few, many more years. As did the children of Israel. They had to stay in Egypt or in the wilderness another 38 years, make a total of 40. But for Christ's sake, his people should not add sin to sin by charging God with the consequence of their own wrong course of action. Now we have men who claim to believe the word of God, learn their lessons that, now have men who claim to believe the word of God learned their lesson that obedience is better than sacrifice. I was reading through a sermon last night from an Adventist theological journal, and this individual was stating that the devil really doesn't care what we know. He really doesn't care what we believe, as long as we don't practice it. As long as we don't practice it. Is obedience better than sacrifice? You bet it is. Obedience is better than anything. He has showed thee, this rebellious people, man, what is good, and what doth the Lord require thee, but to do justly, and to love mercy, and to walk humbly with thy God, Micah 6:8. And you can find that in 10 MR 277.3. But it was written December 7th, 1941. We may have to remain in this earth many more years because of insubordination. Insubordination can be so devastating that it can cause a whole nation, a whole people, to wander in the wilderness. In the case of Israel, it was 38 more years. She said, we as the children of Israel, if we had wandered another 38 years from this time, that would bring you down to what year? 1939. Just add 38 years. What happened in 1939? What great world event happened in 1939? What we call World War II began, the invasion of Poland by the Germans. Would have World War II happened if our people had done their job? Would World War II have happened if our people had done their job? No. World War I would not have happened if our people had done their job. There would have been no Holocaust. There would have been no genocide in Rwanda. But we have failed to do our job. And we are still here remaining in this earth. But I want to tell you, friends, we are not going to remain here much longer. Because we're either going to get ourselves in line with God's program or we're going to be out. God's going to have a people, and they will keep his commandments, and they will have the faith of Jesus. But if we don't, we're going to be put out. By the late 19th centuries, later part of the 19th century, Adventists had firmly established doctrines on the Sabbath, the state of the dead, and so on that we spoke about before. The books Desire of Ages, Prophets or Patriarchs and Prophets, The Great Controversy. These were all published between 1888 and 1889. And these books have helped shape Adventist thought for generations. It was at this time that we entered into this crisis with Dr. Kellogg. And this is the time when we find all of these statements of Ellen White, and there are several, where she speaks about holding on to the truth that we've had for the last 50 years. Amen. Is that important? If we don't hold on to the truth, what do we have? We have nothing except error. And error is never harmless. Error will not sanctify us. Error will not set us free. There's a statement in volume 4 of the Testimonies. I think I can pretty well quote it. It's on page 595 in paragraph 4. That's 4T 595.4. And she says, "It is as sure as God lives that we have the truth. And Satan with all of his hellish arts cannot change the truth of God into a lie." And she wrote that around 1881. Now, have you ever heard the idea that the Desire of Ages changed us as a denomination, changed our theology? It's been said the Desire of Ages changed us. Why? Because on page 530 of Desire of Ages is a statement that says, "In Christ was life, original, unborrowed, underived." If you have time, we'll talk about that another time, or if someone wants to ask a question about that, we can talk about that. But during this time, Adventism is going global. We've got missionaries all over the world, and growth is happening. But we're growing at a rate that we really are not structurally, institutionally able to deal with it well. And there were problems. And Ellen White began to call for reform in the church structure, not in the doctrines. Do you understand the difference? The institutional structure, how it operates, the machinery. She was calling for reform. She never called for a new organization, but she called for reorganization. And in 1897, and especially in 1901, she made calls for reformation. If you get the General Conference bulletins of 1897, you're going to learn something that probably very few of you have ever heard. And that was that the General Conference, this machine that was based in Battle Creek, Michigan, it actually divided itself into 3 General Conferences. There was a General Conference of America, a General Conference of Australia, and a General Conference of Europe. And from those 3 General Conferences, all the work was to emanate. Well, that did change. They sort of put it all back under one umbrella. But the church's rapid growth revealed the limits of its 19th century structures. And at the 1901 General Conference session, the church adopted some sweeping reforms. Now, Ellen White had been in Australia, but she wanted to come back to America, and she wanted to come back especially for this General Conference. And she did. And it was